Hey, what's up everybody, and welcome back to the channel. So today I wanted to take a look at one of my favorite genres to play on the Nintendo Switch, being turn-based RPGs. These games, they really just feel perfect to play on the Switch, especially in portable mode. And the great part here is that the Switch, it has a lot of games available from this genre, some of which are even exclusive. So today, we are going to take a look at the top 15 best turn-based RPGs available on the Switch as of this video. Of course, all of this is only my opinion, and I'm in no way saying it's absolute. But if I do miss any of your favorite games, let me know your favorite games in the comments below. Other than that, though, let's just go and jump right into things. And to start this list off, I have a bit of a unique game being Monster Sanctuary. Now, this game is very different compared to the rest of the games on this list. It's an odd combination of a Metroidvania mixed in with the monster capturing genre, and yes, that does include turn-based combat where you assemble a team and battle it out. There's actually quite a bit of a strategy here as you choose how to level up each monster with a number of different abilities and moves. There's even an online component within Monster Sanctuary, and really this is just a surprisingly good game whether you like Metroidvanias, the monster capturing genre, or in this case, a turn-based RPG. Over the years, we've seen a number of Wii U games get ported over to the Switch, and yes, that does include Tokyo Mirage Sessions, which is a combination of Fire Emblem and the Shin Megami Tensei franchises. Truly, this is a bit of a dream combination here, though I will say that Tokyo Mirage Sessions seems to take more inspiration from Persona than the actual mainline SMT games. Though I don't necessarily say that in a bad way. It, however, yes, is more lighthearted, it's colorful, it's upbeat, and if you do like J-pop music, that's going to be a bonus here as well. All in all, though, I think that this is a fun game and a fun mashup between Fire Emblem and SMT in a light-hearted way. Now, if you're looking for more of a difficult turn-based RPG that's both different and that's really going to test your skills, you might want to try Darkest Dungeons. This is actually a roguelike RPG about psychological stresses of adventuring. The struggle to stay alive in Darkest Dungeons is a very real thing, and it creates this tension in every single battle, which in my opinion is what really separates this game from others within the genre. You're not just simply going through the motions like other turn-based games, but rather with every single battle, it feels stressful, but still thrilling all at the same time. Like I said though, this is a very challenging game, and with its RNG and roguelike elements that even includes characters dying from stress itself, this is not necessarily going to be a game particularly for everybody. Now, going a little bit more old school here, I have Grandia 1 and 2 HD, which are best described as charming, especially the first game, which is lighthearted in nature. This was actually originally a PlayStation 1 game, but it's got an HD version available on the Switch now, which is great to see. It's a story-driven adventure where the protagonist and his friends, they race against evil to uncover an ancient civilization. So it has a fun overall premise, and really I can just say that it's a fun overall game from its story to its characters, and even with its combat. Like I said before, it's nothing short of charming with its quirky characters and vibrant colors. Now, as for the sequel though, this one is a little bit different, originally being a PlayStation 2 title, but both are worth playing even all these years later. League of Legends for years has been one of the most popular MOBAs out there, but as of recent, Riot Games has been branching out by expanding the universe even further, and that includes Ruined King, a League of Legends story, developed by the Battle Chaser studio. Now, the first thing that you might wonder though is whether or not you actually need to know anything about League of Legends, and that's the great thing about this specific game because no, you do not. This is strictly a single-player game that allows you to play in the League universe with some of its beloved characters. Sure, if you are a big fan of League, you might have a little bit of extra appreciation here, but again, this can be played as a completely standalone game, and it's actually a very well done turn-based RPG. You have auto attacks and lane attacks, which is a nice nod to MOBAs, but it plays very much like a traditional JRPG, such as your older classic Final Fantasy games, and I have to say, Ruined King has a strikingly beautiful art style. Out of all of the games on this list, Operencia is the one that surprised me the most. This is a game that I kind of went in blind, so I really had no expectations for this game or anything like that, but it sure did have a lasting effect on me. This is a first-person dungeon-crawling RPG with a grid-based movement system in each environment, and that's one of the things that really stood out to me when it comes to Operencia. It's very creative with absolutely beautiful scenery. In one world, you can be in an underwater dungeon fighting frog soldiers, and then in the next, you might be in a castle flying high in the sky. It's truly imaginative with a lot of variety, and it's also cleverly laid out with various puzzles scattered within each environment. So it's really not just the combat that's fun within Operencia, but the exploration is a major highlight here as well. I also really enjoyed the characters, their chemistry with one another, and just the overall story. It plays out almost like a fairy tale storybook, but it was all just so well told, and it has great voice acting on top of that. There are very few games out there that has as passionate of a fan base as Undertale, and that might be a little bit of an understatement. But it is praised for its originality, as you don't technically have to battle at all in this game. It does have a meaningful story where the protagonist gets to choose to slay the many monsters that stands in his way, or instead, you can actually befriend them. So you really don't have to battle anybody in this game if that's something that you don't want to do, and you will meet some very memorable and quirky characters along the way. In a lot of ways, Undertale, it actually reminds me of a mix between Earthbound and then Moon RPG Adventure, which, by the way, both of those games are available on the Switch as well, and especially with Earthbound, that is available on Switch Online. That game is often viewed as one of the all-time great JRPGs, so if you like Undertale, and if you're subscribed to Switch Online, Earthbound is a must-play. Both these games I cannot recommend enough. Now, for those that grew up with old-school JRPGs such as Final Fantasy VI, then you'll feel right at home with Octopath Traveler. Yes, it's very clear where its inspiration came from, but it does have those more modernized visuals dubbed HD 2D pixel art. It's an absolute beautiful game, but it also plays phenomenally well with its turn-based combat where you exploit enemy weaknesses. The thing that really separates Octopath Traveler, though, is that unlike other JRPGs, you do have 8 unique stories as you travel the world and grow your party with 8 different travelers. This, however, does come with some downsides, though, because for the most part, they don't necessarily interact with each other all that much. So I do think that the overall story itself, it leaves something to be desired, though to be fair, some of the individual stories are still very interesting. Even still, though, this is a great old-school JRPG that has now kicked off HD 2D games. Okay, so if you're just looking for an intricate JRPG that's going to challenge you, has good overall design, and bleeds atmosphere, then Shin Megami Tensei 5 sits at the top of the list. This is a game that's truly going to test your skills, and it requires a lot of strategy as you build your team of demons. I think in terms of combat, there's really not many games that does it better than Shin Megami Tensei 5. And for that, I think the hardcore turn-based fans out there, they're really going to love this game. However, even though its combat is nothing short of superb, why don't I necessarily have this game ranked higher than it is? Well, to me, that really just comes down to its story. I do hold story in very high regards, and that's really not SMT5's strong point. Like many SMT games, it's philosophical, and that might be interesting to some people out there, but as a whole, I feel like that this is actually one of the weaker entries on this list, or at least in terms of its story. So because of that, this is a game that I would recommend purely for its combat and atmosphere, which are both absolutely outstanding. If you would have told me a combination of Pokemon and a Monster Hunter was a good idea, I don't know if I would have actually believed you. Like, to me, that just sounds kind of bizarre, but, well, Capcom, they did just that, and they did it wonderfully so with Monster Hunter Stories 2. This is a follow-up to the 3DS Monster Hunter Stories, though you don't actually have to have any knowledge of that first game to enjoy its sequel. And really, I can say the same thing about the Monster Hunter franchise as a whole. You absolutely do not have to be a Monster Hunter fan to enjoy this game because Stories 2 is good enough to stand on its own. It's got intricate combat, it's got a heartfelt story, and it's intertwined with a great art design and strategy with building your own team of monsties. And that is the thing about this game. You're not a monster hunter just looking to kill everything, but instead, you're actually a monster rider, which befriends the monsters that will fight alongside you. It's a well-done twist, and while, yes, I think Monster Hunter fans will appreciate this world and universe just a little bit more, again, whether you like Monster Hunter or not, this is a good, solid turn-based RPG that any fan of the genre should try. I know over the years some fans have been a little bit disappointed in the direction that Square Enix took Final Fantasy in. They're more action-driven now, as we've seen with Final Fantasy 15 and 16, but that right there is why Bravely Default exists. This here is your old school Final Fantasy game, to the point that the first game was actually originally developed as a Final Fantasy game until they eventually changed its name to Bravely Default. So truthfully, this is your old school Final Fantasy game here, though to me, they took the combat to just a whole new level with Bravely Default. I think that these games might actually have my favorite combat in this entire genre, because there's just so much strategy involved in how you build your characters and mix and match the jobs to best fit your team. Then you have the Brave Default team, where you either stack attacks or instead default, which puts you on the defensive while banking more turns. It's a real mind game, especially with some of the more challenging enemies, but on top of that, I think that it has a good timeless art style to it. I think it has an enjoyable story and just a good cast of characters. So fear not, old school Final Fantasy fans, because we do have a game for you, and that is Bravely Default 2. And if you do have a 3DS, I would highly recommend checking out Bravely Default 1 and Bravely 2nd as well. Now, here's a game that really took me by surprise, and it's actually one of my favorite RPGs that's released in recent years, being Bug Fables. This is another one of those games that it wears its heart on its sleeves. You can clearly tell where its inspiration comes from. It takes a page right out of Paper Mario's book. The thing about this game, though, is that it's the Paper Mario 3 that fans have been asking for well over a decade. It's a true turn-based RPG with a charming world, it's got good characters, and it has an enjoyable story as well. That's actually the part that surprised me the most, though, because I came away more than just a little bit satisfied with its story. On top of that, if you do seek a challenge, it can be challenging if you set the difficulty on hard. So, I mean, it's got good combat within interactive elements. The world itself is fun to explore and has some puzzles and platforming along the way, and it has an enjoyable story. So again, Bug Fables isn't just a game that was simply inspired by a classic, but rather I think that this is a game that Nintendo should be inspired by. Okay, so here I have Pokemon Legends Arceus, which very well might be my favorite game on this entire list. Now, you can include Pokemon Sword and Shield here as well for its competitive multiplayer, which really there's not many games that can go toe-to-toe with the competitive scene of Pokemon. Yeah, the single player is not necessarily challenging in mainline Pokemon games, but its competitive multiplayer, yeah, that's a whole different story. However, for those wanting a good single-player Pokemon game, Legends Arceus took the Pokemon franchise to new heights with its campaign. Now, I am a huge Pokemon fan, and I've enjoyed its classic adventures since I was a kid playing Red and Blue on the Game Boy. But Legends Arceus, this is a game here that really surprised me in a way that I was not expecting. This is actually a game that I went into cautiously optimistic, because I wasn't necessarily sold on the idea of it straying away from that classic formula. I needed to see it in motion first, and well, when I played it, I mean, it just sank its claws into me immediately. Its story was genuinely good. It's an origin story when people feared Pokemon because, well, they're dangerous in this game. They're not just some cute and cuddly creatures that, you know, they're your friends, but they will attack you in this game. And then the combat itself, I mean, I think that this was the most fun that I've had in a single-player Pokemon game probably since I was a little kid. It is surprisingly challenging, especially some of the later trainer battles. Sadly, though, there's not really enough of these battles, and that really is its only downfall. I do wish there was more, but as for the exploration, it's great, it has a good story, and catching Pokemon is seamless and rewarding. If anything, for you Pokemon fans out there, I mean, really, Legends Arceus is absolutely fantastic. If there were any instant classics on this list that'll go down as one of the greatest JRPGs for years and years, that would probably be Dragon Quest XI. Now, Dragon Quest has one of the best reputations for this genre, and really that's for good reason. They offer memorable stories, they have a beautiful art style from Akira Toriyama, they're just so timeless, and Dragon Quest XI, I mean, it follows that exact formula to a T. Unlike other long-running franchises out there, Dragon Quest XI stuck with its roots and then perfected it. I mean, really, this is your traditional JRPG that feels like it came straight from the 90s, but with more modern visuals, and I say that in the best possible way. That's not a knock at all. A lot of fans view the 90s as the golden era of JRPGs for a very good reason, and this is a game that fits in with those timeless classics and even surpasses many of them along the way. You get a grand adventure here, a timeless art style, fun combat, and they wrap it all together in an emotionally driven story. To put it short, Dragon Quest XI is an easy recommend, and in my opinion, a must-play for for any fan of the genre. And at the number 1 spot, I have none other than the Final Fantasy franchise. There's a reason that many of the games on this list, in some shape or form, was inspired by Final Fantasy. They really are that good, but in my opinion, what has always been just so special about the Final Fantasy franchise is in just how timeless they are with their stories, their worlds, and their characters. With every game, they're different, and they change how they approach combat. And I mean, there's always going to be a debate on which one is the best. Is it Final Fantasy 7? Is it 8, 9, 10, 12, etc., etc.? There's always going to be that debate out there, and that's because each game is great in their own way. And that's exactly why everybody has their own personal favorite. Though what I will say for myself is that I would recommend all of the mainline entries that are available on the Switch. Now, my 2 personal favorites are 7 and 8, but you really can't go wrong with 9, 10, or 12. They're all excellent in their own way and among the very best turn-based RPGs to ever exist. Though I guess technically 12 is a real-time action game, but even then, I'd still recommend that one as well. Anyways, though, that's it for this episode, but if you liked the video, don't forget the bell notification and subscribe button for more content just like this. Also, if you'd like to support the channel through Patreon, thank you for making this content possible. Peace out.